My wife and I have never worked a court case with one of us as the prosecutor and the other one handling things for the defendant. Well, not yet. My law degree got lost in the mail or something, and Bev's was eaten by the dog. Or maybe we never went to law school at all. I forget. Anyway, we don't have to argue about who's guilty and who's not and then try to be happy in our marriage despite this conflict, but we also don't have to argue about coffee. That's because we get a steady supply of Sparkplug coffee, and we like it. They've been our sponsor for a very long time, and they want you to know they have the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans in the vast country of Canada. They offer customers a lot of different blends and roasts, including a rotating seasonal blend, and they also give you the choice of decaf or half calf. If you're a Canadian like we are, then you get your order shipped absolutely, positively for free. Customers in this country, or those in the US of A, will get what they pay for within a week. But if you become a member, it gets even easier. You not only get perks and deals that casual buyers do not, perks, coffee, but you save money on every order. And you can set it and forget it. Your Sparkplug stuff will arrive when you need it. So this is not some coffee of the month club that sends you orders when it's not quite time for a fresh batch. And you can pause or even cancel your membership any old time. So in addition to the word pinky, let's ask the court reporter to get this on the record. Sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Make sure to use that HYES promo code and you will save 20% off your next order. HYES. Have you ever seen? You probably got that. You're smart. All right then. I have a movie to review, so I need the author of our theme music to play us in. Andrew Luther, that's you. Ready? And action. Have you ever seen Adam's Rib? Hi there, movie lovers, and thank you for sticking your earbuds in and listening to the 524th podcast on this channel we call Have You Ever Seen? We go back and review classic films around here, and we spoil them. The name my parents gave me is Ryan Ellis, not the hockey player. If he's a podcaster, I'm not aware of it, and I'll be talking you through this one all on my own today. My wife Bev doesn't work with me on these Friday shows. She'll be back on Monday, though. When I yap alone about movie classics, I go through the plot sequentially and break down just about everything. Plus I make some possibly amusing jokes, deal in a bit of tomfoolery, toss a few dozen asides at you, and muse aloud about why the filmmakers did this, or why they did that. That's definitely going to come up in this episode. So let's begin. Adam's Rib was released by MGM in mid-November 1949, although it was up for Oscars alongside the 1950 movies, which was similar to Casablanca. That came out at the end of 1942, but it ended up winning 3 Oscars, including Best Picture, in the 1943 group of films. And it's odd, as long as you get your movie into a certain number of theaters by December 31st of a given year, then the film was technically released that year and it would be up for Oscars in that year. A lot of movies have made most of their money in the next year, but they actually got released December 20th or 31st or December 10th. You know how it works, probably. Well, no matter when it came out, George Cukor's rom-com was well reviewed. 96% of Rotten Tomatoes critics gave this film a pat on the back. 86% of audiences do too. For those critics, the average is 8 out of 10, and there are 28 reviews on the site to back that up. Wikipedia says that the film made just shy of $4 million on a budget of $1.7 million, so that's a nice return on investment for MGM. The movie was nominated for only 1 Oscar, Ruth Gordon and Garson Kanan's story and screenplay, back when it was laid out like that as story and screenplay. Sunset Boulevard rightly won that award. Gordon and Kanan were nominated for 3 screenplays over the years. Then Ruthie Ruth went on to get 2 nominations for Best Supporting Actress, too, winning, of course, for her work in Rosemary's Baby almost 20 years after this flick came out. The National Film Preservation Board decided in 1992 that it was time to put this film into the National Film Registry. They didn't wait long. The board only started preserving films in 1989. Annie Hall, The Birth of a Nation, Bonnie and Clyde, Double Indemnity, there's a great one. The Gold Rush, Nashville, another great one. Paths of Glory, okay, most of these are great. Paths of Glory and Psycho all went in that year too. We covered all 8 of those motion pictures. All but Paths of Glory are way back in our archives because those 7 were on the American Film Institute's lists of greatest American movies. Speaking of lists, Adam's Rib was beloved by the AFI. They spotted it 7th in the romantic comedy category of the top 100 genres. Of course, to explain this again, for those who may not fully get this, there were 10 categories on that list and 10 films made each one to give us 100. See, I can do math. You guys don't think I can, but I can do math. And it was 22nd on the top 100 laughs list. 22nd. Some Like It Hot was the number 1 AFI choice on the laughs list, and City Lights was considered the greatest rom-com in history. So to hit this again, because I will a lot in this episode, Where Adam's Rib finished on the laughs list astounds me. 22nd? Enough of you people found this movie that hysterical to rank it 22nd? Okay. Adam's Rib was also nominated for AFI's Top 100 Passions. That I get. Maybe should have made that list. The Courtroom category of the Top 100 Genres. And no movie on the genres list, by the way, made 2 categories. Many movies were nominated for 2 and maybe even 3 categories, but only made 1 apiece. That may have been deliberate, may have been just coincidence. And it also was nominated for the 1998 and 2007 AFI Top 100, so the main list, the greatest movies of all time. Okay, there's the raves, the awards, all that stuff, so let's break this sucker down. We open with Miklos Rocha's jaunty music and some fun opening credits. We've had a lot of great opening credits on this channel lately, particularly in the motion pictures I've reviewed by myself. Superman, Bullet, now this. These aren't as elaborate as Superman or Bullet. Those were really big, especially Superman. But they're not just simple text on the screen either. It's a proscenium arch type thing as the various pages of names get pulled up the screen, almost like a reverse guillotine. After that, the first face we see wandering around the New York streets is Judy Hollidays. She plays Doris Attinger in this, and she's stalking her husband because she thinks he's been stepping out on her. Her purse helpfully falls to the ground so it can reveal to the camera that she's got a revolver in there. What a dark way to start a rom-com. But this part is amusing. Doris has an instruction booklet that tells her how to fire her gun, so she leafs through that to get some murdering tips before bursting in on the 2-timer. We're about to find out that she's quite a bad shot, so either that pamphlet was lacking, or she should have spent more time reading it. But in any case, Doris barges into an apartment where her man is in fact canoodling on the couch with a lovely lady, so she was right. Shots are fired, dude. She misses her man with most of them, but manages to get him in the shoulder with one. Then she falls to the ground with him, and they cry together. So sweet. Not so funny, but oddly sweet. And so you have to think she's going to the Huskow, like Roxy Hart. But no. A newspaper headline tells us she's only been charged with assault. She got off easy, considering she could have easily killed Warren or his main squeeze, Beryl. Incidentally, Tom Ewell plays Warren and Gene Hagen is Beryl. But yeah, no attempted murder charge? No? Really? And here's why this movie got made at all. The presence of 2 major stars who'd worked together before and would team up many more times again. I think they made 9 films together in total. Woman of the Year and Pat and Mike are among them. Plus there was another title you will hear several times during this episode. It was always silly in these Code-era movies when there was a bedroom scene and a married couple slept in 2 separate twin beds. But at least the blocking is interesting here. Tracy's bed is on one wall and Hepburn's is on the other, so they're facing each other feet first. If you're going to do the twin bed thing, that was creative. Adam Bonner, so that's Tracy, has to be rousted out of bed at 7:30, but he's like our dog Sam and he's just too tired. Although his wife Amanda, Hepburn of course, has very clearly been up for a while. She's prepared coffee and breakfast in bed, and she's also got the morning newspapers for them to read. Now I don't know about you, but I never want to eat as soon as I wake up. I need to drink water and brush my teeth before I even think about having a meal, or even a cup of spark plug coffee. When Amanda tells Adam about the Attinger incident, a lot of A's and I's there, he's barely interested. Of course, I'd probably be the same if my wife said that some stranger shot another stranger and they both lived to tell the tale. After all, no one died here, and Americans do die by bullet every day, and they also fire guns at each other in record numbers. So what's one more story about that? If you're going to get upset about every story about a shooting, you're going to be awash in tears every minute for the rest of your life. Both Amanda and their maid are proud, though, that Doris stood up for herself. Look, I'm cool with a woman not just having to take a man's abuse with gentle good humor, but an attempted murder is good with you ladies? Really? We actually don't know yet that both Bonners are lawyers, even as they drive downtown to work. But little note here, I love that Hepburn is the one doing the driving. It's always an intentional move, especially in old movies, when women drive men around. They are literally, in the driver's seat. This was no accident by Cukor. Good work. She's still upset about the Attinger thing, telling her husband that there's a double standard for men and women, that women can't get away with things that men get away with. Adam isn't all that supportive of the idea, although he's not being a complete jerk about it either. He's just one of these old school guys who doesn't really want to have these discussions in the first place. Spencer Tracy, both the man and the characters he often played, would have hated living in the real world today. And considering old Spence was born 123 years ago, you'd be a bit of a fool if you expected him to meet our modern standards of social awareness in these old movies. Watch an old Tracy film, and if you're easily triggered, then, well, prepare to be triggered, because that's what's going to happen, most likely, especially these ones with Hepburn. I think that was part of the dynamic. They knew what they were doing. Anyway, we find out that Adam is the assistant district attorney. He didn't ask for it, and he certainly doesn't want it, but he's been assigned to represent Warren in the Attinger case. We also find out that Amanda is just an attorney at law, not something as highfalutin as the ADA. She asks her secretary Grace what she thinks about a man cheating versus if a woman cheats. Grace disappoints Amanda because she thinks men shouldn't be punished too harshly for cheating, but she thinks very badly of a woman who does it. It keeps piling up for Amanda after she hears from Adam on the phone that he's been forced to take up for Warren. This is her last straw. Those stupid straws. And Amanda vows to help out Doris. Adam visits Warren in the hospital, who's got his left arm and his left ear bandaged up. Ow, you hit me in the ear! Quite understandably, Warren is agitated while Adam is as level and calm as Spencer Tracy almost always was. Well, not towards the end of this movie, but usually. Meanwhile, Amanda talks to Doris and finds out the Attingers have 3 young kids. Doris also claims that Warren has been hitting her for nearly a year, which is also about as long as she thinks he's been cheating. Lust and violence. Doris is obstinate and suggests she's not going to be the easiest client to defend. Amanda is trying to call this shooting an accident, but Doris doesn't agree. She wanted to shoot him. You probably shouldn't tell the jury that detail if you like to stay out of the slammer. And here's one thing you almost never see anymore, unless it's a gimmick or if it's in a dynamic action scene, and that is that Hepburn, Holiday, and Eve March, who plays Grace, the secretary, play this scene in a single unbroken take. I didn't start my stopwatch and confirm just how long, but it goes on for several minutes. Anyone who's ever worked on the stage does this every night, sure, but I'm always impressed when movie actors carry on a scene this long and not stumble or miss a line. I also saw that Hepburn helped Holiday out while making this movie. Kate was trying to make sure that Judy got the lead role in Born Yesterday after she, Holiday, had originated it on stage. It didn't sound like the studio boss that had the rights to Born Yesterday was going to cast her, whether the Judes was great in the stage show or not. I also read that Holiday was nervous during production of this film. Not only was she new to making movies, but she was working with Hepburn and Tracy in one of, I think maybe even her very first film. Is it her first film? I think it's her first film. Anyway, working with these two right out of the gate. Since this film has a great home-work balance, we get plenty of scenes in the Bonners' very nice apartment. What a nice place. They're planning a big dinner party for 8 p.m. that night. While getting gussied up, Adam gives her a brand new hat, which she loves. All seems well, but he doesn't know she's committed to representing Doris. She drops that info on him, but only after everyone has arrived, which shocks Adam into dropping a platter in front of their friends. Comedy. Cut to after dinner, where he sulks while they're watching home movies with the gang. Home movies? Everybody loves those. Their neighbor, Kip, tries his best to make everyone laugh. David Wayne isn't to blame for not making me laugh. The material is just more obnoxious than funny, although I'll say that his tone and delivery reminded me, at least a little, of Donald O'Connor in Singing in the Rain. Mr. Wayne isn't at that level, but to even remind me of O'Connor at all is saying something. The home movies, which all these people have seen many times before, are videos of the Bonners paying off their mortgage on a house in the country and clowning around. Yeah, paying off your mortgage. A bigger fantasy than anything in a Marvel movie these days. If you wondered, as I did, what this scene was doing here, it will have a payoff. So after everyone leaves that night, then they get into it. Adam asks her over and over again to give up the case, but we've got no movie if she agrees. He claims he's going to cut her into 12 pieces, but that professional threat is offset by a gentle goodnight hug. Smart. They're not going to bed angry. They are going to bed right after a pretty rough threat was thrown out, but not angry. On the first day of the trial, we see that Amanda has given Doris that fancy hat Adam had bought, which gets a double take out of him. Comedy. While interviewing potential jurors, Amanda reveals her strategy that women should get treated equally under the law. The first potential juror does not believe in equal rights for women, so he's out. While the next guy is being sworn in, the Bonners each knock a pencil off opposite sides of the table and reach down to pick them up, so they can make moony eyes at each other under the table. I really like that moment. These are rivals, and of course he's angry that she's even doing this, but they're not only in love, they're still really hot for each other. It wouldn't take much to turn this into a porno, and this probably basically has been a porno, but they fight at work, but they go right home and make up all night long, all night long, all night. The next scene has them canoodling after he gets home from the office. They seem split about having a bite to eat or adjourning to the boudoir for a bite. They choose the meal option, but he doesn't take long to ruin the mood by asking her again to drop the case. Amanda compares herself to the people who dumped tea in the harbor at the Boston Tea Party. Those Bostonians dramatized an injustice, and that's what she's trying to do. A tux-wearing Kip pops in to supposedly funny things up, and as he did during the party, he reminds them that Amanda is his lawyer. Is that going to pay off, or is it just supposedly a funny runner? Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. I don't think that does really pay off. Kip also sings his Amanda song while playing the piano. I think it's Farewell, Amanda. We heard that on the radio again later. I guess Cole Porter wrote this little ditty for the movie based on some other song he'd written before. And I should note that before Kip walked in, Cukor staged the cooking scene as another pretty long oneer. We covered Armageddon 11 days ago, a movie that just couldn't sit on one shot for much more than the blink of an eye. Now I'm talking about a movie that just lets the scenes play out for minutes at a time, without any close-ups or coverage. I'd love to see George Cukor's version of Armageddon. I wouldn't like to see Michael Bay's version of Adam's Rib. Or maybe I would. Maybe I would, Marge. Maybe I would. Back to court, I assume the next day, and Burrell gets her turn on the stand. While asking questions right in front of the witness box, we get a great example of something I only noticed after George Clooney or somebody, I think it was Clooney, talked about it in the last 10 or 20 years. And that was how Spencer Tracy would often stick his hands in his pockets and look down at the ground before delivering a line. What Clooney said is that Tracy wasn't doing that to appear like he's thinking, but to look where his mark was on the floor, which seems like something an amateur would do. But I have to say, I'm with Clooney. Talk about making something work for you. Watch a Spencer Tracy movie, especially if he gets to speechify, and I guess he almost always did, and you're going to see him look down at the floor before he starts talking. Clooney did something like that too when he was on ER, the way he would bashfully look down, then look up with those hunky eyes locking onto the other actors. But he admitted that what he was doing was reading complicated medical dialogue off a piece of paper in front of him. Cruise runs, Pitt eats, Hanks pees, Tracy and Clooney look down. Adam doesn't have all that many questions for Barrow, but Amanda goes after her pretty hard. Leave Jean Hagen alone! She'll always have my loyalty after her brilliantly hilarious work as Lena Lamont in Singing in the Rain. She's a villain in that movie, but man is she funny. I saw it again recently. I've seen it so many times. What a performance by Jean Hagen. Next on the stand is Warren, whose ear is improving, but still bandaged. That's a good way to show the passage of time. Mr. Cukor, that little bandage, obviously the ear's getting a lot better. Because he's under oath, Warren has to be honest that he was a bad husband, he didn't love his wife anymore, he called her fat, and he even beat her up. Yet when Amanda asks if he thinks of himself as a good husband, he says yes, because of course he is. I take major issue with how the script wrote Amanda's tactics in the courtroom, but this guy does make you at least a little glad that somebody made him suffer. Still, attempted murder, man? During Adam's cross-examination, Warren claims Doris threatened him on a regular basis and would even slug him while he was asleep. Maybe that's why I wake up so often in the late morning after I've worked a night shift. Bev comes in and socks me the ribs a few times, then ducks behind the bed and I can't see her. Why am I awake? I'm getting abused. Okay, well, here's the main event. Doris has her turn on the stand. I guess the Addingers are still married, but it's curious that Doris is still wearing her wedding ring. I would think that she thinks this marriage is over, no matter what happens in the case. The defendant admits that she was enraged by Warren's affair and almost admits that she intended to kill him in barrel. It's a slight pause and a subtle look on Holliday's face, but it's there. She's obviously been trained by Amanda to not actually tell the truth because we know she did want to put holes in both of them. Amanda keeps on yelling objection while Adam has his turn interrogating Doris, which ends with the lawyers shouting at each other. That night, the Bonsters have made up enough for her to give him a massage, then for her to return the favor, make that him to return the favor. They're both only in towels through a lot of the scene, so I wonder if it suggested that before any of this rubbing, they pushed those beds together. These characters seem very randy to me, and it's obviously a big plus to get the rom right, and Cukor and the writers and the cast did that, because I don't think they got the com right. Adam smacks Amanda while she's laying prone. What he claims is just a good-natured slap on the bum, though, makes her right mad. She thinks he wasn't just trying to have a little fun, but trying to actually boff her one. She claims that he never tries to see her point of view, although he says he always does try to see it, and criminy, here come the waterworks. He tries to make nice because no man wants to see a woman cry, but she just kicks him in the shin. Well, no man I would want to associate with wants to see a woman cry, especially if he's the reason for the dribbles to start dribbling. The next day, Amanda has brought in a few dozen women to testify, implying that this case is more about womanhood in general, not just the Addingers with their cheating and their beating and their handgunning. This time, the pencil under the table thing happens so that Amanda can stick her tongue out at Adam. The various women testify, I guess that they're impressive people, and they are. I'm with Adam on this one, though. What has this got to do with a jealous and battered housewife shooting her philandering husband? The woman who can do backflips? Yeah, impressive talent. But what is the point of this? Why is the judge putting up with it? And I really hated the next thing. Just to show off how strong she is, one of the witnesses picks up Adam and lifts him into the air. Tracy is clearly attached to wires, so it wasn't even a convincing effect. This whole sequence was stupid. Funny? Good God, no. It's just dumb. Which has brought me to my movie in a nutshell. Although I won't go with the obvious thing people said about this movie in the reviews, which is Battle of the Sexes. No, my Adam's Rib nutshell is mistrial. Because the minute a witness puts her hands on one of the lawyers against his will, we're probably looking at the judge slamming his gavel and saying that dreaded word, mistrial. But he doesn't in this case because comedy. When the Bonners get home, he gives her the silent treatment. She apologizes for taking things too far, and I think she should have at least apologized, if not quit the case in shame for being part of any of that nonsense. Nonsense. Acting childish to win an argument, especially in a courtroom, is, well, childish. Of course, giving your spouse the silent treatment, as Adam is doing here, is also childish. But he's fed up with the way Amanda is handling this case, and he can't live in the same apartment with her anymore. He packs a suitcase while yelling at her about the way she's making a mockery of the law and that she doesn't respect him. He doesn't want a competitor, he wants a wife. And he doesn't want a new woman as a wife either. What Tracy says in this scene would piss off a lot of the socially awares these days, but this movie is more than 70 years old. Let's keep that in context. Plus, the movie is going somewhere with this. Back to the courtroom. During her closing argument, Amanda asks the jury to think of Doris and even Beryl as men and to think of Warren as a woman. Close-ups of the three actors dissolve to shots of them dressed up as the opposite sex, which is cute, but not that funny. Probably was back in 1949, 1950, but not now. Mrs. Bonner just wants the jurors to make their judgment as if the sexes were reversed. So I didn't laugh, but this scene does age pretty well, I think. I can agree with a lot of what she's saying, that men shouldn't get a free pass when they cheat, and we should try harder to understand a woman's point of view. But let me say this for at least the third time, if not the fourth. This was a murder attempt. Was the motivation understandable? Yeah, I guess. But you have to make judgments in a courtroom based on the law. I just never really bought Amanda's argument that this case should be about women's rights. I did enjoy in this scene when Adam let slip the nickname the Bonners use for each other, Pinky, which the court reporter doesn't hear the first time and makes him say clearly for all to hear. Partly because of that, Adam is flustered and misspeaks a few times during his summation. Maybe that's a big reason the jury votes to acquit? Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. But you know what? One reason you put someone who's committed violence in jail is the worry that he or she will do it again. Do we not think Doris might pull a gun on Warren again? Okay, he's a terrible person, I agree, but should he die for it? If you say yes, then please admit this. You root more for revenge than justice. The Attingers shake hands tentatively when it's all over, and Beryl even joins in as the three kids are brought into the courtroom to celebrate with Mama. Guys, you don't have to be friends now. Or has Doris given a three-way some thought? Adam congratulates his wife for her win, but she says she wishes it could have been a tie. Oh, come on! You fought this hard for something you believe in, it worked, and then you're sorry about winning? You can be sorry that your marriage is in trouble, but stand by this mockery you've made of the law, Mandy. And so the case is over with about 20 minutes left in the film. I guess that makes sense. This movie is about the stars and their problems, not the Attingers and theirs. Since the Bonners' marriage seems to be through, Kip swoops in. All Amanda can talk about is Adam, but Kip, without physically forcing her against her will at least, makes a hard play for her. He even claims he loves her. Good exchange here. She says he's behaving like a man. He's behaving like a man. And he fires back with, you watch your language. Okay, good. That was good. I didn't laugh, but that was pretty good. I smiled at that. Adam bursts in and pulls a gun on them, but he's just trying to prove a point. I get what Cukor is doing in this scene, and these actions do prove to Amanda that no one has the right to pull a gun, even when the target is a crappy spouse. But no one needed to worry that blood might be shed because Adam takes a big chomp out of his licorice gun. He's a sucker for licorice. It's a pretty good payoff and point taken, but this movie has a weird and dark sense of humor. I like dark senses of humor, but be funny when you're wallowing in something like marital gunplay. Once Amanda is sure that she's not about to be shot by Candy, the argument turns nasty. While the camera stays in the hallway, you can hear punching. I didn't think even a movie this old would go as far as to have Adam hit her, so it's at least comforting to know that the scrap was between the guys. Kip comes out in the... Well, that's not good either, I guess, but Kip comes out in the hallway with torn clothes and I think bruising on his head. Although now that I think about it, maybe the Bonners got some shots in on each other too. We didn't see any of the Dukaroo, so we can't be certain. I guess if Adam had popped Amanda, or if she had taken a poke at him, it would show the way it does with Kip. Maybe that's why the makeup is so oddly extreme on David Wayne, to show that the lady didn't end up taking physical abuse from her husband. But still, the Bonbons decide to get divorced, and they spend the next scene bickering over who gets what. But what about that place in the country? He cries over what's become of them, which amazes Amanda. Is that all it took for him to cry? That they have to split up the country house? Of course, he reveals later that this salty discharge was just an act. They decide to go out to the farm in the country, leaving their accountant to figure out the mess of their assets. I forget who coined the phrase, but rom-coms back in this era were known as the comedy of remarriage. It may have been Jeannie Basinger, is that her name? Does commentaries on old DVDs. I guess this is a classic example of the comedy of remarriage, literally. Because that night we're back to blissful times as they end the film out in the country. Adam tells Amanda that the powers that be want him to run as a Republican nominee for the county court judge. He also shows her how he can dredge up fake tears whenever he wants to. Well, real tears, but fake emotion. Anything women can do, men can do as well. I think these two are going to have some powerful makeup sex. And we're out. Before I talk about the cast and the people behind the camera, I want to focus for a minute on the concept of Amanda fighting for Doris as a symbol of feminism and justice. I like that this is a forward-thinking film, especially for the time it was made. That wasn't exactly a liberal time in America, the late 40s, early 50s. I agree there is still a double standard in our society, and that's wrong. Every person should be treated the same under the law, especially when a certain group, women in this case, are now the majority. Right now, I don't mean back then, but now. They outnumber men, at least in America, and I think Canada. I think that's even true in the entire world, that there are more women than men in the population. I also must say that even though the title is a clever play on the Adam and Eve story from the Bible, I found Adam's rib to be wrong. They made a movie so clearly in favor of Hepburn's feminist character, yet they called it Adam's rib? Okay, yeah, that's a play on how God ripped out one of Adam's ribs, and the vengeful one made Eve. Although wasn't Adam created out of dust? Why couldn't the first woman be created the same way? Not enough dust to go around, God? They had something potentially great here, and I do think the movie is pretty good, but it needed some rewriting and even rethinking to even approach greatness. If I was laughing uproariously all this time, or even, say, 3 times, maybe I could have forgiven these flaws. So the cast. Before today, the only time we've discussed a Spencer Tracy flicker show on this channel was back in 2014, when we reviewed Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. He was one of the greatest actors ever, but he just didn't make that many great movies. I don't think so anyway. I've said this before on this channel, although we've only ever covered him once before, but I think I've brought him up here and there. Plenty of good movies, but not a lot of iconic or awesome ones. Tracy won 2 Oscars in the 30s, and in back-to-back years at that, for Captains Courageous, and Boys Town. He was nominated 9 times in total, including for his final performance, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. 9 times. Katharine Hepburn was unofficially Spencer's real-life wife for decades, although he remained married to his actual wife Louise the whole time. The Heps played his wife in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. We know he was nominated for that movie, but she won an Oscar for that work. Then she won again the next year for a film we'll probably cover in a few months, The Lion in Winter. She won 4 trophies in total, something no other actor has ever matched, although Daniel Day-Lewis and Frances McDormand have 3 apiece, and they're still working. Well, she is. DDL likes to play this "I'm retired" game, but I'm sure we'll see him again in something someday. It seems like we'll never see Jack Nicholson act again, although he would tie Hepburn with 4 wins if he ever did come back to acting and won another Gold Naked Guy, although one of his was a supporting award. DDL and Francis all leading, as was Hepburn, all leading awards. Hepburn won one of those 4 Oscars for On Golden Pond, which Bev and I discussed a few years ago. She was also in Bringing Up Baby, The Philadelphia Story, both with Cary Grant, and the 4th AFI movie she made was The African Queen. Those 3 and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner were all on AFI's list that we covered many, many, many years ago. Of course, Hepburn was a strident feminist in this movie, but she also was in reality. Considering stories eventually came out that Tracy would get rip-roaring drunk on a regular basis and sometimes biff her around while he was sauced, well, I'm surprised this particular woman would put up with that. Plus, he never did divorce his wife and marry Hepburn, although maybe Kitty Kath didn't want that. It's possible. It's just odd. You'd think Katharine Hepburn would spend her life with someone who was as forward-thinking as she was. From what I gather, he didn't have to act when he played these men who were, let's say, bemused at the antics of the women in their films. Woman of the Year has an ending that's pretty tough to accept in 2023. Maybe we'll cover that one of these days. That was also beloved by the AFI. The lady with that one-of-a-kind voice, Judy Holliday, won an Oscar in 1950. So the same year this movie was nominated, but it actually really came out the next year. That was Born Yesterday. Holliday was good in that and in this, but it's so odd to think that Bette Davis and Gloria Swanson walked away empty-handed for their incredible work in All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard. Now that I think about it, though, I should be happy that the comedy was rewarded in this case, because usually it's the dramas or the dramedies that walk away with awards, because that's what Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve are. They're not deadly serious. They do have some comedy in them, but they are dramas, so more dramedy, I guess. Tom Ewell worked with Billy Wilder and Marilyn Monroe a few years later in The 7-Year Itch. Yes, Marilyn is the star of that movie, but Ewell is the main character, and I think he does a great job of playing the straight man to Norma Jean. He's just elegant. Jean Hagen plays Beryl. She was so wonderful a few years later in Singing in the Rain and should have waltzed away with the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for that film. Only 2 nominations for Singing in the Rain. That's a crime. I think it was the Score adaptation or something like that. And then her for Supporting Actress. Should have been nominated for all of them. Adam's Rib and Side Street both came out around the same time, but it looks like this film was released first, so Adam's Rib was her debut. The Gene Machine was also in the Asphalt Jungle soon after this came out. Then it was that hilarious turn in Singing in the Rain a couple years later. She kept working after that, but nothing stands out like those 3 or 4 titles do. David Wayne went from playing the neighbor Kip to being in How to Marry a Millionaire and a ton of other things, including getting all serious on us in the Andromeda Strain in the 70s. Okay, I haven't seen that movie in a very long time, so maybe he wasn't serious, but the subject matter sure was. Their director, George Cukor, I guess I'm saying that right, Cukor, not Mr. Cukor. So Cukor has come up in our reviews before, although it's been a while. He was behind the bullhorn in The Philadelphia Story, working with Kate in that and in many other flicks for that matter. Plus, he was one of the many people who directed Gone with the Wind, although Victor Fleming was the only one who got on-screen credit for that movie. Cukor won his only Oscar when he was in his 60s. That was for My Fair Lady. We've covered all of those I just mentioned, but I like Lust for Life a lot too, which is a film we haven't talked about. But scroll through the Cuke's resume and you'll see a lot of reputable stuff. Dude knew what he was doing, especially when he made rom-coms. They just didn't always calm so much. In this case, good example. Have I made that point yet? I think I have. The writers were, of course, Garson Kanin and Ruth Gordon. They were married for over 42 years, so they could relate in some ways to this story. You work together, probably not always amicably, then you've got to live a life at home, too. Apparently they stopped working together for the sake of their marriage after writing 4 scripts. So I guess hashing those things out in a room together did take a toll. A big title for those two was Pat and Mike, which Cukor directed and starred Tracy and Hepburn. And of course we know that Gordon went on to be in Rosemary's Baby and take home a trophy at the Oscars. Oh, and here's a fun fact. Gordon and Kanin based this on the real story of husband and wife lawyers who, after their clients got divorced, she married the husband and he married the wife who got divorced. Like sands through the hourglass, these are the days of our lives. Not that this seems like obvious material for sequels or spin-offs, but they did turn it into a sitcom in 1973. That show lasted only 13 episodes. There was also a 1923 Cecil B. DeMille movie called Adam's Rib, but it had nothing in common with this one, and I recognized none of the actors, just DeMille as the director. So this is a pretty good movie, maybe a 7 out of 10. It's well made and the stars execute the script. I just questioned some major plot points in that script. I also think it's fair to say I made a mistake in reviewing this alone. I should have covered it with Bev, so we could spark up a debate about the man versus woman issues. I've complained so much here about Hepburn's tactics and how I don't think it makes sense to defend your client this way in a courtroom, but I bet Bev might disagree. She might say the cause was important enough to justify the circus, and that would have made for a good podcast. Better than this pile of puke anyway. This old pile of puke. It's not like I regret covering it, though. It's an entertaining story, and of course these two great stars always had nuclear heat-level chemistry. I just wish I laughed more, or at all, and could forgive some of the misplaced emotion that just doesn't belong in a courtroom. As for those lack of chuckles, it absolutely boggles my mind that the AFI voters ranked it 22nd on the laughs list. I feel boggled. Fargo was barely on that list. Big Lebowski wasn't even nominated. So many other comedies are lower or not on that list. Of course, one of the big faults with all the AFI lists is that they skew way too much to older movies. And I'd say the laughs list is probably the second worst one after the top 50 stars, partly because most of those 100 comedies were made so long ago, and Bev and I do agree on this, that comedy doesn't usually age very well, with notable exceptions like His Girl Friday, The Lady Eve, and Singin' in the Rain. Geez, even Casablanca is pretty funny. These old black and whites, and this is in black and white, just don't rip the laughs out of us the way they did people who saw this stuff back then. So that was Adam's Rib. On Monday, Bev and I will be back on the job as we gander at the frenetic sci-fi comedy love story family drama and Best Picture Oscar winner, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. The next time I do one of these podcasts on my own, though, will be in 2 weeks. I'm going to cover a sports movie, which might seem weird since I called it quits on my sports movie podcast not even a month and a half ago. I was going to review Body and Soul for Scoring at the Movies, but Chris and I stopped doing the podcast before I had a chance to post that one. But since the work was mostly done late last year when I thought maybe he was going to be away more than he was, because I did some on my own as it was, and I just need to tweak it a bit to make it fit this channel, and to be honest, re-record it because there were some audio problems, a lot of popping P's. All that said, though, I'm going to give you a one-man yammer about John Garfield doing the boxing thing in Body and Soul on this channel, and that'll be on July 28th. Let us know what you think of Have You Ever Seen by emailing us or firing off some tweets. Our email address is haveyoueverseenpodcast@gmail.com, And our Twitter handles are @MovieFiend51 and @BevEllisEllis. Yeah, we're still on there. For now. I know it's controversial, but At some point on Friday, this podcast will be available on YouTube. The browser address is @HYESEllis. Everything we've done in 2023 is there, so go take a gander if you haven't already heard this episode on your podcast app. Or go anyway. Listen to it again. Be a subscriber. Like it. Share it. In tribute to this romantic comedy, give us some love and make me laugh with a good response. And don't forget about our awesome sponsor, Sparkplug Coffee. Use our HYES promo code and you'll save 20% off your next order. The thing to type in is sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Okay, thank you for taking in my thoughts about Adam's Rib. Tune in on Monday when Bev and I review EEAAO. Meantime, you know what I'm going to do this weekend? I'm going to work on getting my law degree. The movies always make it look pretty easy to be a lawyer, and we could really use the money. Plus, if a legend like Kate Hepburn can act like a buffoon and still win her case, maybe I can excel at that job too. And cut.